hello again, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories. I am Ray Russell, and this week very excited to head back to the Chicago Wrestling History Project here at Chicago Wrestling Club, I should say, covering 2 more years, and to me, some very peak years as far as my own selfishness goes. But I'm going to bring in the man with the plan to get this done with me. He is the one and only, to me, he is one of the great Chicago wrestling historian, super fan, the one and only Mr. Richard Vicek. Welcome back to Regional Rasslin, my man.
It's nice to be here again, Ray Russell, and I'm going to cover 1969 and 1970 for the Chicago Wrestling Club. They did 17 cards in 1969. I should let you know, too, that during this year, 3 new teams arrived in the Chicago Wrestling Club. First, there's the Chain Gang from Indianapolis. We had Red Lions and Red Bastien from the AWA, and Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon came in from the AWA. And I found in my digital files an unidentified newsletter where the results with the minute winning holds for 1969 Chicago was listed.
Wow, okay.
You know, so you'll hear me for many of these matches say, Wilbur Snyder beat Mike Riker using the abdominal stretch. Now, it wasn't on every card, but wherever I found that, I included this in the revised results.
All right, yeah, absolutely. I love the details, man. Everything we can get.
Yeah, and unfortunately, with so many of these episodes, there are very few participants who are still alive. From this year, only Lars Anderson, Baron von Raschke, Betty Nicolai, and Bill Watts are still alive.
Wow.
So maybe if you want, and if you're okay with this, we'll start off at the first card of the year, which was Tuesday night, January 21st, 1969, at the International Amphitheater. We have a lot of weekday shows this year for some reason, but there was a big debut on this opening card of the year. It was the Chicago Wrestling Club debut of the Chain Gang, who's in past wrestling lives, they were Don Fargo, who is now Jack Dillinger, and Kenny McMullen, who's now Frank Dillinger. These guys both previously teamed up in Alabama, and they portrayed biker gang characters with a Nazi theme. And they were formed and put together by Bruiser in Indianapolis. They rode to their matches in a hearse. Their jackets, for Jack, his jacket said, Fat Christ. Frank's jacket said, Crazy Judas. So it was a no contest against Bruiser and Crusher on the first of 4 main events they would have in Chicago that year. Bruiser got a payoff of $2,100, which nice to me signifies a pretty good house, a very good above average house. Also on the card, Eduardo Carpentier faced Dr. X. You know, there's 2 different results. One source says a draw, one Carpentier victory. So we're not sure who it was, which one was accurate. On the card, Mitsu Arakawa defeated the Bat with a karate chop. Mike talk last night with Chris Parsons of Wrestling Relics indicated that it's likely that Ken Russell, who would later become Ken Dillinger of the Graduates, was the bat that night.
Okay.
And he had also been in a TV squash match with Bruiser as the bat. So next we have Pampero Firpo beating Paul Christie. Yes. And this was his first match with the Chicago Wrestling Club. His real name was Juan Kachmanian, and he was called the Wild Bull of the Pampas, and you just gave us his trademark growl, if you could call it.
Oh, yeah! Something like that, huh?
Yes. Oh, yeah! And Bob Luce had a hilarious program that night with a headline, Firpo's Hypnosis Brain Transplant. Because he's the wild bull. And the insert photo was Angelo Poffo, who they implied that he brainwashed Firpo. And it was one of the greatest covers in Chicago Wrestling Club history. Also on the card, Mike Riker defeated Jose Betancourt with a backbreaker. Riker was also known as Mike York the Alaskan, and he's the brother of Jay York the Alaskan. And then also on the card, it looks like Paul Christie wrestled twice. And he beat Joe Tommaso.
At least Christie got a win here because he wasn't beating Firpo, it looks like, on this night. But
as discussed earlier, Christie, it took a while to get victories, but he hung in there.
Right.
And you have to impress the owners.
Pay your dues, I suppose, right, at the end of the day, Paul Christie. But you want to go back just really quickly here. I was looking at the Chain Gang, which is, unfortunately, I didn't grow up in this era, but as I collected magazines in the 80s into the early 90s, I got a lot of magazines that would have various, versions of the Chain Gang. We'll talk about that later. But I was so infatuated with, they made you believe, I think, during that period. Talk about getting heat. It was, let's find everything we can do to get heat. First of all, biker gangs were scary, make no mistake about it. But then, you're adding a little bit of the Nazism into it. And then you're adding, the mockery, I guess you could say, of God and things of that nature with some of the things on their vests and things. So it's a very heel-oriented, a very heel-heated tag team. I don't think people might not, some of the people that haven't studied this before, I just want to put over how badass this team was when they arrive here. And we're going to talk a lot more. You're going to talk a lot more about what happens with this team.
We're going to have a horrendous event later in August of 1969. But I remember the TV interviews, they would come out saying how they hate kids. And they'd tell the kids, don't come up to us for the autograph. We're going to knock the heck out of you. The longtime WWA manager and wrestler, Handsome Johnny Starr, in an interview said, I never saw in my wrestling career and being a fan in Indianapolis, any team draw as much heat as the Chain Gang. Especially this first group.
Yeah.
Jack Dillinger and Frank Dillinger. Mm-hmm. So anyway, let's jump ahead to March 1st, 1969. By the way, I was prevented from going to this card. We had tickets and I misbehaved at school. And the dad said, we're staying home. I don't care if I bought tickets to this. So I learned a lesson about disobeying teachers.
Learn from that, kitty. His parents don't do these things today. Not like it wasn't like it was back in the day.
And I missed the matchup number 2 between Bruiser and Crusher and the Chain Gang. So I really learned a lesson. Bruiser got a $2,100 payoff and another great night. The others on the card, Carpentier beat Pampero Firpo using a rolling cradle. Pat O'Connor drew Blackjack Lanza. Wilbur Snyder beat Mike Riker with the abdominal stretch. Moose Cholak beat Blackjack Daniels with his El Squasho. Daniels was a real-life brother-in-law of the Big K, Stan Kowalski.
Okay.
And Louis Martinez beat Joe Tommaso with the Indian Deathlock. That was sort of like an abbreviated standing figure 4 leg lock.
Right. It looked very nasty. I mean, it looked like it would be painful. That's for certain. I remember
in grammar school, some kids, hey, I figured out the Indian Deathlock.
No.
And he puts it on me. You know, I screamed. And part of it is your own leg, your own shin bone pressing against your own leg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, I added this to our discussion now because on the same night, there was an AWA card in Milwaukee. And I just wanted to illustrate that they had so much talent to run 2 shows the same night. Here's what they had. Verne Gagne champ beat Mad Dog. Lars Anderson over Bill Watts via countout. Red Lions over Mitsu. Butcher Vachon over Big Luke. Rene Goulet drew Larry Hennig. So look at all the talent on both of these cards. It was very impressive.
No, yeah, and Bruiser got a $638 dividend you right here for the ownership in the Milwaukee show.
That goes back to when he bought into Kohler's organization.
Right. I found that, fun as a promoter here because you're making almost a third of what you made to go out there and work on the Chicago show, just sitting back and being, just an owner, a stake. And having points in the territory. Just really quickly, 2 things before we move on here. I go back to the International Amphitheater show. First, I want to make it very clear. The first show in January, it was the no contest with Crusher and Bruiser against the Chain Gang. When we came back, we talked about the rematch, and we found out that little Richard did not behave very properly that day, and he missed out. But we do have the results there, and it was Crusher and Bruiser going over this time in the Chain Gang, and I just wanted to clarify that. Also, El Squasho, Moose Cholak going over with El Squasho. Can you enlighten us as to what El Squasho was?
That was a flying. Well, he didn't get too high in the air.
I was gonna say
leaping over the opponent, landing on him, but
just the splash.
Moose braces the fall with his own arms, so he doesn't put 400 pounds right on somebody's chest.
All right, so the big splash, El Squasho.
Yeah, this is a finishing move always.
Okay, very cool.
And I never saw anybody kicking out after an El Squasho.
Even if you tried.
Yeah. So now we'll jump to March 18th, 1969. Dr. X beat Carpentier, and Bill Watts pinned Lars Anderson. Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon teamed up against Wilbur Snyder and Pat O'Connor. That was a no contest. We had Blackjack Lanza defeating Louis Martinez with the pile driver. Pampero beat Rene Goulet with a bear hug, and Bruiser got a $425 payoff for being the co-owner.
Right.
That was nice, that he would get that, and so would Snyder. In this case, Gagne would have got a payoff too for being the owner, but Wilbur was wrestling in the tag match.
Looks like Wilbur's the only of the owners participating on this show. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember. At least one of the 3 would always be there. If I know, and I'll bring that up, but I remember looking for that. The next card, we're going to Tuesday, April 8th at the International Amphitheater. Dr. X beat champion Verne Gagne on disqualification. So obviously they had a great feud the previous year, and so they were magnetic and exciting in the ring. So you can't let that talent just sit there.
No, it kind of feels like Ole and Dusty or Wrestling 2 and Superstar, where you can always bring it back anytime you want. The heat's going to be there. The chemistry's going to be there.
Mm-hmm. The Chain Gang, Lions and Red Bastien on this card. Blackjack Lanza beat Edouard Carpentier on disqualification. Lars Anderson beat Louis Martinez with a knee drop. And there was a midget tag. Cowboy Lang and Wee Willie Wilson beat Fuzzy Cupid and Little Bruiser. Pampero Firpo beat Joe Scarpello with a chin lock, and Bruiser got a $450 payoff for not being on the card. So nice work if you can get it.
Absolutely.
You know, they had to pay, I don't know what the amount was back then, but that payoff in 64. So right now we're 5 or 6 layers, and he's still getting owner payoffs, and he would until 1983. So anyway, let's go to Saturday, April 26th at the amphitheater. Red Lions beat Dr. X. You know, both guys were users of a figure 4 leg lock.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned before, they were brother-in-laws. They were married to sisters. Watts and Snyder were paired off and went to a no contest against the Chain Gang. I remember pre-match Jack Dillinger saying they're going to crush Watts like a light bulb. So funny rhetoric. Moose beat Pampero Firpo on disqualification. Lanza over Goulet with a pile driver. Mr. Clean defeated Mike Riker using a full Nelson hold. Clean had previously used the ring name The Brute, but he was not the same guy as Brute Bernard. And Clean dressed like the cartoon character on the cleaning product label, Mr. Clean.
Well, we would see guys eventually portray the Batman and various characters like that, but Mr. Clean is an interesting choice. But it was a very popular commercial and cartoon figure for the product at the time.
And that character is still on the product.
Right.
I don't know if he wrestled as Clean anywhere else. I've never seen that, but it could happen.
I remember seeing pictures of him, again, going back to when I collected the magazines of Mr. Clean. I believe real name Ernie Bemis. Is that the same Mr. Clean? I know there were a couple guys that tried to do the Mr. Clean gimmick.
Yeah, I think that was the one that we had.
Okay.
On the card, Louis Martinez drew Comrade Nick. That was the first Nikolai Volkov, not the WWF
the original
guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Bruiser got a $500 payoff, and Bruiser and Crusher teamed the same night in Milwaukee, beating Lars Anderson and Larry Hennig. And pretty nice money for Bruiser. He got a $700 payoff and a $750 dividend.
Well, business is doing well, not just financially here, but I mean, to look at all the talent you're able to split between these territories, Verne and Chicago, and it's a hell of a time right now in the world of wrestling up here in the Midwest.
For sure. Okay, we could go now to May 17th at the amphitheater. This is the first time we would have AWA tag champions Bruiser and Crusher against Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon. It was a no contest, so there would be more matches with these guys. Bruiser got a $2,300 payoff, and on his calendar booking sheet, whenever the Vachons were wrestling, he would just write the words dogs.
Okay. Well, keep it simple.
Yeah. AWA champion Verne Gagne beat Larry Hennig on disqualification. Red Bastien beat Mitsu Arakawa using the atomic drop. Moose drew Lars Anderson. Lanza beat Joe Scarpello using a backbreaker. And Angelo Poffo beat Prince Pollens using a cradle. And at this time now, Poffo was a full-time elementary school teacher for the Chicago Public Schools.
I wonder how they felt about Angelo going, because we know about like George Steele, he would go and do the coaching and the teaching and things like that. But he would go back and say how he told his students, "That's not me. I can speak," and whatnot.
I imagine that would happen, because he was on TV and he was doing television commercials for one of the sponsors of wrestling. It was called Candor Electric. It was a electrical contractor who I had at my house a few years ago. And the young kid didn't even know that they sponsored wrestling in 1960s. In fact, they did something very clever and funny. They did a 30-second spot for a phony, fake electric company called Shock Electric, performed by Angelo Poffo. And he would say, "I want you guys to shop at Shock Electric. Don't go over to Candor Electric. Nobody likes those bums." So just to take up TV time, and part of the marketing of the sponsor, they had him sponsoring a fake electrical company. Which I thought, that's very clever.
It is. It's very unique and clever. It's certainly clever for the time. I mean, thinking outside the box like that. And Angelo, I'm sure, did a perfectly fine job there. I think it's going to be a little harder for him to explain that wasn't me on TV when he's using the same name as Mr. Poffo in the classroom. So
that could easily happen. Okay, the next card. Very interesting match. June 21st, 1969.
Oh, boy.
The program said Unholy Alliance, Bruiser and Bobby Heenan as a team. On the TV interviews, Bruiser didn't reveal who his partner was. Bruiser kept going to the locker. They had a fake locker room. He'd open up the locker door and see if the partner was in there. And every time he'd open the door, no one's in there. Then finally he opens the door and he drags out Bobby Heenan. Well, surprise, surprise. Heenan turned on the Bruiser during the match and helped the Chain Gang. And I remember Bruiser claiming that Heenan and the Chain Gang knocked some of his front teeth out. Well, that was worthy of a $2,300 payout for Bruiser.
That was so. What was the finish of the match here?
That details weren't in there other than the Chain Gang won with Heenan's help.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. I was just trying to. I didn't know if there was a disqualification because Heenan turned. I mean, what were you thinking? I guess Dick the Bruiser had to stoop to an all-time low to go find a guy that he had never gotten along. For anybody who doesn't know the history of Bobby Heenan, go try to find some of Bobby talking about his earliest days in the business and being around the Bruiser, kind of learning from the Bruiser, paying his dues with the Bruiser. These guys were at ends, right? So it's kind of odd that he would, again, I think they coined the phrase Unholy Alliance there for wrestling. I think that's the perfect choice.
And they would go back to that well again in later years.
Okay.
But anyway, also on the card, Dr. X beat Red Lions, Carpentier over Lars via disqualification, Poffo beat Louis Martinez, Scarpello beat Santiago Acosta with a cradle, and Johnny Case beat Kenny J with a backbreaker.
Sodbuster.
Yes, that's the same guy. Who was a real-life landscaper. That was his real job up in the Twin Cities.
Oh, okay.
And now on TV in Chicago, the time slots are changed. Now they've moved the AWA broadcast from Wednesday to Thursday nights at 9 p.m. And they also show wrestling at 11 a.m. Sunday, which was basically the Indianapolis tape.
Okay.
And the wrestling programs in Chicago started having ads promoting WWA cards in nearby Hammond, Indiana, where prices were $3 for ringside and $2 general admission. Okay, let's come back now. July 5th, 1969. AWA Tag Team Champions. A no contest against the Chain Gang. This was their third of 4 matches. Bruiser payoff was $1,400. But we have a lot of details on the other matches. Bill Watts beat Larry Hennig with the Oklahoma Stampede. And that was, to best describe it, a running body slam.
Right, the power slam.
He would run 8-10 feet holding the guy, and then bam. So that's how that happened. Dr. X beat Luke Brown with the figure 4. Snyder over Poffo with the abdominal stretch. Renee beat Big K on disqualification. And Johnny Case and Paul Christie drew. So that was July 5th.
Anybody keeping score now? We've got Crusher back with Bruiser here to get revenge after the Bobby Heenan fiasco last time out. Crusher and Bruiser no contest with the Chain Gang again. And as you have in your notes, they're going to bring this back again.
Yes, July 26th, 1969. That happened to be my 13th birthday party. It was actually the 30th. My parents allowed me to bring 4 classmates. That was right after 7th grade. 4 classmates to the matches. You know, they came to our house, and then we all drove 8 of us in a station wagon. And one of these kids was a non-believer that would always say to us wrestling fans in 7th grade, "Why do you watch that stuff? That's fake." Well, you should have saw him when Bruiser was beating Jack Dillinger to a bloody pulp. And the crowd was ranting, "We want blood." You know, but the score was finally settled that night, and the feud ended that night. That would be the last time that this group of the Chain Gang would wrestle as a team at the Chicago Amphitheater. Bruiser's payoff was $2,100, reflecting a good house. Also on the card, champion Verne Gagne withstood the challenge of Cowboy Bill Watts, who could not continue. The crowd really popped when Watts won the first fall with the Oklahoma Stampede. And a lot of us thought, wow, we're going to see a title change.
Right.
But unfortunately, Watts was backdropped over the top rope to the arena floor and did not return.
Okay.
And so that's how they ended the match. Carpentier drew Lanza. Moose Cholak beat Blackjack Daniels with the El Squasho. Daniels substituted for no-show Big K. William Martinez beat Case with the flying body scissors. And Blackjack Daniels wrestled again, beat Joe Scarpello. And now in Chicago, they had a ticket reservation system, later became known as Ticketron, with offices in banks, department stores, and grocers. So they charged 25 to 50 cents service charge. It's a little more than that these days.
Yeah, slightly more. So I was trying to do the math here and do the inflation and go, wow, that's a lot for back then. But no, it's still nothing compared to today.
So I've seen where they want, this is for a big Soldier Field card. I've seen it where they wanted $100 service charge for Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks, which I did not go to for that. It would have been $400 for the ticket and $100 service charge.
Wow. Yeah.
So, anyway, so now no way for that. And by the way, TSR was later sold to Ticketmaster in 1990 to help contribute to their monopoly in the business.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I guess
had the stronghold on the ticket world. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we write off the storyline between this version of the Chain Gang versus Crusher and Bruiser. You had here in your notes no disqualification match, which would have explained the bloody pulp ordeal there. And of course, the right team goes over. Crusher and Bruiser remain supreme for now.
The next card was August 9th, 1969. They brought back Jack Dillinger in a main event against AWA champion Verne Gagne. And I think that was a reward to Dillinger for all the great business that the Chain Gang did in the previous year at the Chicago Wrestling Club.
Yeah. Yeah, for the past 7 months, they've been headlining more often than not.
And also on this card, Mad Dog and Butcher defeated the Redheads, Bastien and Lyons. And you wonder, could something be in the works with this victory by the dogs?
Yeah.
Wilbur beat Frank Dillinger, and this would be Frank Dillinger's last match at the International Amphitheater.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. X beat Moose Cholak. Bill Watts beat the Big K, and Louis Martinez drew Rene Goulet. Bruiser got a $250 payoff. Well, one of the reasons Bruiser wasn't on this one, Bruiser and Crusher were now in Japan for a week of daily cards. They wrestled in Yokohama, Nagoya, Sapporo, Tokyo, Hiroshima, and Osaka. They won the international belts from Inoki and Baba and lost those belts 2 days later. Bruiser was paid $2,000 for the tour, and he likely got transportation and hotel paid for, which they did. There were a lot of photos on the internet from that tour of Bruiser and Crusher drinking big glasses of beer for the cameras. Also accompanying Bruiser and Crusher on this tour was a very young Jerry Briscoe.
Oh.
I interviewed Briscoe for the Bruiser book, and he said, I was mentored by Bruiser on this tour, because I was new and he was a multi-year veteran by now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, they had a week in Japan. Now, on August 24th, there is sad news in Arizona as the former Chicago wrestling promoter, Fred Kohler, passed away. He first started professional wrestling promotion in 1949 at the amphitheater, and he presented TV on the Dumont Network until 1955, originated from the Marigold Arena, which was one of the first major national efforts to promote wrestling nationwide. He was a major force in Chicago wrestling until the creation of the Chicago Wrestling Club in late 1965. And it was Kohler who booked Buddy Rogers versus Pat O'Connor in June 30th, 1961, before 38,000 people at White Sox Park. So rest in peace to Fred Kohler.
Yeah.
But he had the sense to sell the company to Dick, Wilbur, and Verne.
Right.
Okay, August 30th, 1969, big news. Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon defeat Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher to win the AWA tag title. Crusher was injured during this match, and he would not return to Chicago for 7 months. Crusher complained to TV audiences, "I can't even get a can of beer out of the fridge." So that's how bad it was for Crusher. But it was suggested, too, that Crusher's absences at times during his career, including now, were the equivalent of sit-down strikes over money.
Interesting.
And and Mad Dog and the Butcher started an impressive run as AWA tag champions. Also on the card, Lanza had a no contest with Wilbur. By now in Indianapolis, Lanza had dropped the WWA Heavyweight Championship, the Bruiser, after a 20-month run. Eventually, soon, Lanza would transfer to the AWA with his manager, now called Gorgeous Bobby Heenan, because there was a pretty boy, Larry Hennig, already there.
Right.
Also on this card, Carpentier beat the Big K using body flips. He would do some flip in the air, give himself like a somersault or a flying mare, land repeatedly, at least 3 times, land on his opponent. That would soften up his opponent. So he used that against the Big K. O'Connor beat Poffo with the cradle. Von Raschke beat Goulet using the claw, and Martinez beat Kenny J with the cradle. So I should tell now a side story. In September 1969, Verne Gagne had this idea along with encouragement from the Forum Arena in Los Angeles. They put on an AWA card at the Los Angeles Forum, running directly against Mike LaBelle and the NWA Hollywood territory. So on this card on September 6th, Bruiser, Snyder, Watts, Fez, Hennig, Mad Dog, and Butcher go to L.A. And they try to start a new footprint, let's say. Well, after 2 very weak cards, poor attendance, and a cancellation, they went back to the Midwest for good. But that failed invasion happened during these months. September 13th, 1969 at the amphitheater, Bruiser beat Dr. X via countout. Bruiser's payoff was $1,100. This did not generate the kind of heat and crowd like the Chain Gang. But, you could see how they rewarded that Chain Gang with 4 bouts altogether. Mad Dog and Butcher champions beat O'Connor and Snyder. Red Lions beat Jack Lanza with on disqualification. Raschke beat Bruce Kirk with the claw. Mr. Clean beat Joe Tommaso with the full Nelson. And Prince Pullins beat Johnny Case. Now, at the same night, at the same hours in Milwaukee, there was a card. Mm-hmm. This had a semi-main event of that original Chain Gang meeting Moose Cholak and Man Mountain Mike, which the Chain Gang won. Later that night, Frank Dillinger got shot in Burlington, Wisconsin by real bikers who objected to their gimmick. Frank loses a leg, while Babalusa's brother-in-law provided security at the hospital because they thought these gangsters going to come back to the hospital to finish him off. Well, Fargo escaped for his life by swimming across a local river, and he called Bruiser that night to tell him what happened. Well, Fargo decided to clean up the Chain Gang image. They were no longer motorcycle guys. They were clean-shaven. They still wore headbands, but by October 3rd of that year, that's only like 3 weeks later, in Hammond, Indiana, Fargo brought in Chris Colt, who had a lot of experience in many Midwest cities, to portray his third brother, Jim Dillinger.
Only took 3 weeks to forget about Frank Dillinger here, unfortunately. Yes. Frank loses a leg. And anybody who is unaware, Don Fargo put out a very interesting book. I've had that book since it came out. I really enjoyed it because Don Fargo is quite the character, and you hear the stories of some of the things Don would do in and certainly outside of the ring. But that is a fascinating story because we've heard the story of the Sicilians, Lou Albano and Tony Altamori up there. They get told you're mocking the mob, the mafia, whatever you want to call it, and you need to stop or we're going to stop you. And so they're never the Sicilians. I mean, they literally go home and go, yeah, we're not doing that gimmick anymore. I mean, immediately overnight. The Chain Gang doesn't get that opportunity. They're told, we're not giving you another chance. And they run for their lives. Frank does not make it. Don Fargo does luckily he's able to swim, or he learned to swim that night anyway, and he gets away and he lives to wrestle another day. Unfortunately, Frank never wrestles again. He loses one of his limbs by simply portraying a wrestling gimmick.
We're lucky their feud in Chicago with Bruiser and Crusher already had 4 bouts.
Right. Now,
I don't know if they would have feuded them with somebody else, but at least I don't want to say, the timing was great.
Right. No, I know what you mean. As a wrestling fan, we think like that sometimes, though, don't we?
Yeah. Okay, next we go to Saturday, September 27th. Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon defeated Wilbur and Edward Carpentier. Red Lions beat Von Raschke on disqualification. Man Mountain Mike beat Larry Henning on a countout. Red Bastien beat Goulet with a cradle. Angelo Poffo beat Bruce Kirk with a net breaker, and Scarpello beat Tommaso using the airplane spin. Bruiser got his $350 payoff wrestling somewhere else. Next, we go to October 11th, 1969. More main events for Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon as they defeat the Redheads on disqualification. We had Edouard Carpentier defeating Jim Dillinger in his debut at the Chicago Wrestling Club. You know, Colt was part of a team called the Hells Angels in the Sheik's Detroit territory, and then he became Chain Gang partner number 2 for Fargo. We had Snyder over Hennig. Man Mountain Mike defeated both Bob Sabre and Angelo Poffo. They do that sometimes with a 400-pounder, put him against 2 men.
Right. The handicap match, right, yeah.
Yeah. Bill Watts beat Goulet. Bruce Kirk beat Ken Russell. We talked about him portraying the Bat earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. And Bruiser got a $425 payoff, not on the card. Hey, here's the next one. This is the Redheads against the Vachon brothers. You always thought sometimes there was going to be a title change, but, you know, Lions and Bastien just didn't have enough confidence by Verne, you know, to be the champs, but they were very formidable and interesting opponents. They won on disqualification this night against the Dogs. Moose Cholak beat Larry Hennig. Pat O'Connor won on disqualification against Crazy Luke Graham. And they had another handicap match with Man Mountain Mike against Big K and Johnny Case. And Betty Nicolai beat Jean Antone in a ladies match. But for some reason, the program had a picture of Sharon Lass, Bob Luce's wife.
Right. Easier to attain the picture,
yeah.
I would imagine. They figure one lady, you see one lady, you've seen them all, right? That's how the wrestling world worked.
We had Paul Christie beating Johnny Case, and Mad Mountain Mike beat Luke Graham in a 10-minute body slam challenge. Bruiser got $600 and that was probably more than most of the wrestlers on the card that night.
No kidding.
Based on my... Now, this is the next one that's really interesting. November 22nd, 1969. I want people to listen to the names of the 10 wrestlers on the first 5 matches of this card. You can't make up a list like this. Bill Watts over Blackjack Lanza via disqualification. Moose Cholak beat Jack Dillinger with a bear hug. Von Raschke over Red Bastien. Eduardo Carpentier versus Butcher Vachon, and Red Lions drew Jim Dillinger. Look at that. I mean, look at the level of talent there. They did not fill the card with Johnny Case and Prince Pullins or Kenny J. Mm-hmm. And then they had a 12-man battle royal. They added Man Mountain Mike and Luke Graham to the battle royal. And I remember there were final 4 guys were Moose, Baron, and the Chain Gang. So the Chain Gang was trying to lift Moose over the ropes, but Baron ran over and he pushed all 3 over the top rope at once. Great effect, you know? And Bruiser won a battle royal, pushing up his stature in the Chicago Wrestling Club. And Bruiser got $900 this night, and he wasn't on the card. That's just a tribute to how those top 10, those 10 guys, the big names, that had to draw people saying, look at all those names that we're going to see in one show.
tried and true finish there to that battle royal. One of the heels, Baron sneaking over and just dumping everybody out to get the victory and get the purse. And I love that they used Man Mountain Mike properly here. I think, as just a spot in that battle royal, kind of like the Andre spot, sort of in a way. Yeah. For this night. So it was a fun show. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Tuesday, and this is the final card of the year, December 16th, 1969. The Chain Gang were victorious over Dick the Bruiser and Moose Chowak. Bruiser's payoff was $1,000. Baron von Raschke beat Pat O'Connor with the claw. And this was first done by Baron against O'Connor in St. Louis.
Okay.
And it was O'Connor encouraging him and coaching him along the way. Bill Watts beat Mr. Clean with an Oklahoma Stampede. Carpentier beat Larry Hennig using that flip somersault maneuver. Mm-hmm. I remember, though, Hennig's rhetoric before the match. He goes, Frenchmen can't fight. And when you think who's the military leader in France's history, it's a woman, Joan of Arc. And it was very, very effective rhetoric. Him bad-mouthing the baby face. We didn't know he really wasn't from Paris, but that's okay. No. Pepper Gomez beat Joe Tommaso with a Mexican drop, and Dr. X beat Louis Martinez with a knee drop. Mm-hmm. Finally, I want to comment on a newspaper article the following year, which was in the Daily Calumet, which was a South suburban newspaper. During 1969, remember this number, the Chicago Wrestling Club grossed $455,000 for those cards. The previous year, I estimate the maximum they could have grossed was $336. So now they're earning almost $120,000 gross income more than the previous year. Wow. And there were 147,000 fans at the Chicago Wrestling Club that year, compared to 123 for the previous year.
Right, yeah.
This territory is so hot, and I wanted to put it in perspective. I went to Larry Matisik's PDF history of the St. Louis wrestling card. Mm-hmm. For 1969, the St. Louis Wrestling Club attracted 140,000 fans, which averaged 8,770 fans per card. Chicago averaged 8,653 that year. Wow. So now we are approaching on a average daily card the same numbers that Sam Muchnick is doing in St. Louis.
That is amazing to put that into perspective and think about it. You can say Chicago's a big town. You can say Chicago wrestling was once a big deal, but when you actually put it down and look at the actual numbers there, Richard, it's excellent work on your behalf to do.
Because I was thinking, wait a minute. When I saw that article in the suburban newspaper, mm-hmm. and how a suburban newspaper would start to cover wrestling from a legit business standpoint. Wow. And I thought, wait a minute. I wonder how St. Louis would be doing. And, of course, Larry had the PDF.
Yeah.
That was a great year for 1969 when you see how they almost increased their attendance by 1/3.
Oh, they're
unbelievable.
Really bringing in and building the talent. We've seen the development of Lanza, and Bill Watts continues to be groomed. Baron von Raschke, it looks like he's starting to become a thing here. The Chain Gang run develops into the Vachons are being built up. All the Chain Gang are reigning supreme, and now the Vachons have taken over that spot. I mean, you're talking about world-beating talent here in Chicago right now. The Bobby Heenan story in the ring, the Frank Dillinger story out of the ring. There's a lot going on in the world of Chicago wrestling.
A great year. This was their 4th year.
Yeah, it's crazy. And these promoters are all getting along and working together to do this right now. We didn't see that a lot in the world of wrestling when you had multiple guys with their hands in the cookie jar, but it's working right now. It's we can see that. The proof is in the numbers that you just spouted out here.
Almost 8,700 average attendance. And just 5 years ago with Jack Pfeffer, the crowds were in the hundreds.
Wow. Well, you can't say that the town is dead. We have not killed Chicago as far as wrestling goes. And we're going to talk more about that, guys, in just a moment when we take on 1970 in the Chicago Wrestling Club. But right now, we're going to take this quick WrestleCopia timeout.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here. Lots of new stuff happening here at WrestleCopia, and I want to update you on everything going on with the brand right now. First and simple, if you haven't checked out our website at WrestleCopia.com, it's a great way to keep up with the latest episodes of all of your favorite Copia programming, from the Wrestling Memory Grenade to Regional Rasslin with the Territory Talk, the Wrestling Stoop with the legendary Bob Roop, Professor Dan Ginnity and the Pro Wrestling Academy, and all the other great podcasts from Gene Jackson, Bob Smith, Dave Dynasty, and the boys from the Other Ship. And of course, all of those programs also available at your favorite podcast streaming platforms. And if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the Copia world, all the latest news, random thoughts, fun videos, pictures, and more, make sure to join the more than 33,000 followers over at Facebook.com/WrestlingGrenade. Don't be left out. Please also follow us at the former Twitter, now X, at Wrestling Grenade, and subscribe to YouTube.com/WrestlingGrenade. Would also greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review at your favorite podcast apps, guys, because every positive review makes our podcasts more visible in the algorithms, if you will, which allows us to continue to grow. Now, for those who have been asking about merchandise, WrestleCopia merch, you can find plenty of designs for our t-shirts, hats, magnets, stickers, coffee mugs, and more over at the TeePublic store. That is tpublic.com/user/WrestleCopia. And last but definitely not least, it's what keeps the entire machine going. I'm talking about patreon.com/WrestleCopia. Now with 3 major tiers and tons of Patreon exclusive next level content for our supporters. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all the quality programming that we offer.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
All right, guys, welcome back to the program. I got Richard Vicek still here with me. And now we've just talked about the successful year of 1969 in Chicago. Now we continue on to the new year of 1970. Richard, welcome back to the other side.
Very nice here to talk about 1970 in the Chicago Wrestling Club. And I frequently thank the historians of yesteryear.
Absolutely.
Who compiled this information and they mailed it to each other. You know, I'm not going to always list everybody, but there is Tom Burke and Ron Dobratz and George Shire and later James Zordani. I mean, there's
Oh my goodness, yeah.
where would we be without those guys?
100%, man. Yeah, they've certainly secured wrestling history. I can't thank them enough. Some are still.
Oh, there was another. I'll remember another guy, Terry Robert Justice. That was another guy that did monthly and sometimes weekly newsletters.
Yeah,
just packed with results. Mm-hmm. And all he asked for, well, you could have this newsletter if you send me some results from your town.
Can't ask for anything better than that.
Early death via an automobile
car accident. Yeah. It's unfortunate. I think he passed away in 1981 or something like that.
Yeah.
But man, his work there from the mid to the late 70s into the early 80s is second to none. A lot of that history would be lost without those Terry Justice files, as I like to call them.
Very good. So this year there were 20 cards in the Chicago Wrestling Club. Many are on Tuesday nights this year. This is before we had the Rosemont Horizon Arena, before we had the UIC Pavilion or the Wintrust venues. So maybe that's all they could do is get Tuesday dates. Okay, Tuesday, January 3rd, 1970. AWA champion Verne Gagne defeated Bill Watts. Next, we had the new Chain Gang defeating Wilbur Snyder and Moose Cholak. And this is setting them up now for future feuds. Von Raschke over Larry Hennig, Pepper Gomez over Poffo, Lee Martinez against Jack Pesek, who was an amateur wrestler standout, and a debut, Jim Valen.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about this Jim Valen character, Richard?
Well, he was born in Tullahoma, Tennessee in 1942 as James Harold Fanning. He would spend many years off and on working in the Chicago Wrestling Club. Jim Valen, in many short years, would become Handsome Jimmy Valiant.
All right, you got to start somewhere.
Yes. Anyway, this night Bruiser got a $350 payoff wrestling elsewhere. Okay, Tuesday, January 20th, 1970 at the amphitheater. AWA champion Verne Gagne beats Baron von Raschke on disqualification. This was Baron's first challenge of Gagne, but he got disqualified. This wouldn't be the final time he faces Verne Gagne. Don't forget, Raschke was trained by Gagne, and Raschke was an amateur wrestler from the University of Nebraska. Okay, the new Chain Gang with another victory over the Flying Redheads, Bastien and Lyons. This was a big victory for the new gang. It was WWA over AWA. Mm-hmm. And, the Redheads frequently, they wore matching purple Tarzan tights. They were sort of dressed alike, And, we had Pepper Gomez over Luke Graham, Wilbur over Butcher, Lanza over Mr. Clean, and a new arrival for the opponent, Prince Pullens. His name was Buddy Smith. And I'll tell you who he was later on. Right. He was from British Columbia in Canada. He would later become Buddy Roberts of the Freebirds.
Wow, okay.
He didn't wrestle a lot. He wrestled a few times, but that's who he later became. And of course, with the Freebirds, by the 80s, that was just a unbelievably hot triple team.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. From Mid-South to Georgia,
but look at
Dallas.
You have to start and pay your dues. Look at on this series I'm doing. How many people are paying their dues?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we saw that was, when you covered other years in earlier episodes as well, some of the other guys that are now beginning to break out, like Lanza and things of that nature. But yeah, and they obviously didn't do this on purpose. They didn't know what these guys were going to become, but it's funny, last show in the arena, we kick off the show with up-and-comer Jim Valen, and he becomes Jimmy Valiant. Now we're doing it with Buddy Smith, who's doing a job to Prince Pullins of all people. But Buddy Smith's going to go on it. Well, he's going to continue to do jobs in that role of the Freebirds, but he's going to be a hell of a bumping machine in that ring. Buddy Roberts, very cool to see him here passing through Chicago early in his career.
Very good. Well, on Tuesday, February 3rd, we had Edouard Carpentier versus Mad Dog Vachon with a no contest with contrasting styles. There is a matchup of these guys on YouTube from Montreal, a 2 out of 3 fall match if you're really interested in, because that's the time when Mad Dog had a promotional interest in Montreal. Those guys are on YouTube. The Crusher beat Butcher. The Chain Gang, the new gang, again defeated the Redheads, Lyons and Bastine. The Redheads were the greatest AW team to never hold the belts, but they surely made a respectable showing for themselves. Okay, we had Von Raschke beating Wolver via countout. Pepper Gomez beat Buddy Smith. Moose Cholak beat Jim Valen. And Bruiser got a $600 payoff for his ownership stake. So that was pretty good. Mm-hmm. Now, the next card was Friday, February 27th. They had to switch places. They went to the Aragon Ballroom on North Broadway in Lawrence in Uptown. This venue opened up in 1926. It was a major music venue for all sorts of genres, like the big band, the big bands toured there in the 30s and 40s, and then rock and roll. That venue is still there, part of Live Nation, another monopoly, in near monopoly in music venues. Right. But anyway, Von Raschke is continuing to move up the ladder as he loses, counted out of the ring against Bruiser. We should know that around this time, Bruiser and Snyder would select Raschke to be the new WWA heavyweight champion, a title Raschke would hold for 586 days.
Wow.
So that shows how valuable he was to that promotion and how much the promoters thought of him.
Right.
Bruiser's payoff was, $11.50 that night. The new Chain Gang defeated the new team out of the AWA, Carpentier and Pepper Gomez. Dr. X beat Martinez. Moose defeated Lanza on disqualification. Surprise, surprise, according to George Shire, Heenan interfered. Gee, I wonder if he had the loaded glove or the tongue depressor. But anyway, it all worked. Angelo Poffo beat Prince Pullins, and Paul Christie beat Ken Russell.
Okay.
Now, we're back to the amphitheater on March 16th. The Chain Gang, Jim and Jack Dillinger, beat Bruiser and Moose, counted out of the ring. This is a further payoff for the new gang. Bruiser got a $2,600 payoff and a $2,000 dividend. That's how good this drew. Snyder and Verne were not on the card. Bruiser was the star of the show, so that helped his payoff.
No doubt. I think Bruiser's getting ready for a vacation here.
Yes, he did not have to share the main event slot with Gagne or Snyder. And look at the quality of the wrestlers on this card. I'll go over the rest. And these guys were all main event types who were willing to work underneath. Crusher beat Mad Dog. Von Raschke beat Bastine. Carpentier beat Crazy Luke. Pepper beat Hennig. Red Lions drew Lanza.
Wow. Well, that might be the most stacked card we've seen top to bottom since we started.
That is just...
That's insane.
Yeah.
No wonder they drew so well.
And those big guys were willing, I'm just speculating here.
Yeah.
All 10 of those guys, even being in the undercard at the amphitheater that night, they are being paid more than probably 80% of their other jobs. If they were in Green Bay or the Quad Cities, Moline, Illinois, or Elkhart, Indiana, whatever it may be. So now let's jump to Tuesday, April 7th. The Crusher is back in Chicago after a 7-month absence, and he's now teaming with Eduardo Carpentier. Against the Vachon brothers, it's a no contest. Listen, we also have the same quality of undercard. Pepper Gomez beat Dr. X. Snyder over Lars by disqualification. Jack Dillinger beat Red Lions, Red Bastine, Drew Lanza, and a new arrival, Bob Windham, defeated Graham. Now, Bob Windham was a former U.S. Marine and New York Jets football player. He was trained by Verne Gagne, and he was a referee and ring truck guy. Why don't you tell the crowd who Bob Windham later became?
Absolutely. Well, the last name sounds familiar. It's because it is. He's the father of Barry and Kendall Windham. He is Blackjack Mulligan arriving here. And your audio cut out when you mentioned his opponent. It was Luke Graham. I got the Graham part. So clearly, unlike Jim Valen, unlike Buddy Smith, they have some ideas for Bob Windham already. He's going over crazy Luke Graham here in the opener, but my goodness, he would become, and you talked about him being a ring truck driver and a referee and things of that nature. We would see Verne do that a lot. He did it with the Baron. He would do it with Khosrow, the Iron Sheik later on. He did that with a lot of the guys. They had to pay their dues no matter how talented they were, even as amateurs in some of their rights. But no, Blackjack Windham has arrived.
And the next year, he would be in WWF rings in Boston facing Pedro Morales. And what happened?
Is that where he got stuck, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. He got shivved, so to speak.
So the next card was April 21st at the amphitheater. Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon ended up in a no contest versus Crusher and Carpentier. George Shire records indicate the time limit expired during the third fall of the match, and this feud would continue. We had Jack Dillinger over Pepper. Jim Dillinger beat Wilbur. I don't know. That was surprising. The co-owner loses, but you want to build up those guys. Right. Wilbur put business first. So what? If
he always did. Match? Yeah, you've pointed that out time and time again with me. It's amazing how selfless he was. His ego was at the back door as long as he was, doing the better for the business, literally.
Yes.
And so a lot of guys would think that would mean that I'm going to main event and beat everybody, right? Right, Bruiser? But no. Wilbur did his part.
We also had on this card Raschke over Windham, Lanza over Bill Howard, who is new to the Chicago Wrestling Club, and Lars Anderson over Paul Christie.
Okay.
So next we'll go to May 5th at the amphitheater. Bruiser resulted in a no contest against Baron von Raschke, keeping Baron's profile high. Bruiser's payoff was $1,300. It wasn't the greatest of cards, and noted his calendar noted he flew to Chicago on American Airlines that night. Also on the card, we had Jim and Jack Dillinger beating the Crusher and Carpentier on disqualification. Crusher probably lost his cool. We had Pepper beat Dr. X on disqualification. We had Dr. Big Bill Miller beat Red Lions, and this was a Chicago Wrestling Club debut for Miller, who was a legit veterinarian in the state of Ohio, and he was part of the same 1951 NFL draft as Dick the Bruiser. Only he was
think how late into his career Bill Miller is here, just now arriving in the Chicago Wrestling Club scene. But no,
he could have had some gigs with Kohler. He's famous for a dressing room feud with Buddy Rogers.
Yes. I remember that. That goes back to Al Haft, was it not?
Yeah. Okay, we have on this card Ernie Ladd back beating Bob Windham. The football season is over. Ernie's with Kansas City by now.
Okay.
And we had Mitsu Eric Howard defeating Joe Scarpello. Okay, Monday, May 18th at the amphitheater. Jim and Jack Dillinger defeat Bruiser and Crusher. There's a continued push for the chain gang.
Mm-hmm.
Bruiser got a $1,100 payoff. Barron beat Ernie Ladd. It's interesting now. We didn't know it then, but within 3 years, they will be tag team partners in Indianapolis, managed by Pretty Boy Bobby Heenan. Also on that card, Snyder over Hennig, Dr. X over Red Lions, and Bastien Drew against Pepper Gomez, a rare baby face-off at that time. We had the girls. We had Princess Jasmine defeating Mary Jane Mull. Princess Jasmine was trained by Calvin Prince Pullens, and they were an item for several years in real life.
Well, that would explain why she's a princess.
Yes. And Bob Windham over Jack Pesek. Hey, let's go now to June 2nd, 1970.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, we have the resolution of the Bruiser and Crusher versus the new chain gang, the second group, Dillingers, Jim and Jack. This was the final appearance. Bruiser and Crusher won. The Dillingers would break up after this and leave the WWA. We also had Bruiser with a $1,000 payoff. Other matches, Raschke over Carpentier. In fact, go Raschke, because he's being set up for the near future.
You can see what's coming here for the Baron. That's all the people needs to know, because my goodness,
yes.
He's really, even when he's not winning, he's in the main events, and they're certainly focusing on Bear von Raschke for the future.
Yes.
You can see that here. He's very much being developed as a main attraction.
Yes. Wilbur beat Dr. X on disqualification. Bill Miller over Pepper. Moose Cholak versus Double X. This guy had the ring name Jim Osborne, previously with the McGurk territory. And then we had Paul Diamond arriving in the WWA. His real name was Paul Lehman from Canada. And so it's farewell to the chain gang. But that was a great team in those two versions.
That was a hell of a run, just 18-month run, but man, what a run it's been.
I don't know if they would have had payoffs in their other, if they're doing the wrestling down south in Huntsville, on a weekly show. I mean, compared to these nights at the amphitheater with 11,000 fans.
Right.
So anyway, Tuesday, 16th at the amphitheater. They brought Bill Miller in, and he was the challenger to AWA champion Verne Gagne. Miller was an AWA champion in 1962 as the masked Mr. M. Yeah. We had the AWA champions Mad Dog and Butcher defeating Ernie Ladd and Wilbur. Raschke over Pepper, another victory. We had some midget wrestlers.
Yeah.
Cowboy Lang and Lord Littlebrook over Little Bruiser and Mighty Adam. Lanza over Poffo and Moose Drew Mitsu. Verne Gagne would now go on television saying, "Hey fans, we are planning an outdoors card later this summer." Oh, so that was nice to know. Wow, a big card.
Absolutely. Big card coming up. Outdoors.
Yeah. But anyway, the next amphitheater was Tuesday, June 30th. And they had an unusual 6-man tag match. Bruiser, Crusher, Ernie Ladd beat Mad Dog, Butcher, and Lanza. Bruiser's payoff was $1,100. Raschke beat Red Bastine, a top name, another feather in Baron's cap.
Yeah, these are some really established names. I mean, these are not just underneath guys. You put here in your notes, winning streak by the Baron, and that's very much true. He's winning every time out, and these are not just everyday Joes on the card either. No. So it's continue to watch the Baron, folks.
Yeah, we had Mitsu over Christie, Gold Pepper over Windham, Paul Diamond over Double X, and Joe Scarpello over Lars Anderson. Let's jump to Tuesday, July 7th at the amphitheater. Mad Dog and Butcher defeated Bobo and Ernie Ladd. That was the only time Bobo and Ernie teamed here. But I thought that that team would get more mileage. Hey, what do you think? Baron Von Raschke beat Dr. Big Bill Miller.
Well, there you go. It continued. We just talked about Bill and his past, obviously under the hood, but I mean, to continue this streak, this might be the hottest streak anybody's been on. Because usually somewhere in there's a hiccup. There's a loss, there's a disqualification or no con. This is Baron going over each and every time out. They must be building to something here, I'd have to imagine.
And the date was announced. Friday, August 14th at Comiskey Park, the home of the Chicago White Sox. In fact, they raised ringside ticket prices to $12 compared to $5. And these $12 seats, there were only 1,000 seats on the field. So they were, because you were going to get some pretty big names on this card. Bob Luce put out a press release on July 22nd saying, if we get a sellout here at White Sox Park, our box office gross would be $207,000, which would be a wrestling record. Well, they never achieved it, but nonetheless, it was a powerful lineup. We had scheduled the AWA Tag Team Champions, Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon, against Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher.
Wow.
Well, first, Mad Dog refused to have a match like this. In an interview, he said, unless he and the Butcher got $20,000 payoff. Bob Luce, I want $20,000 for myself. You could imagine how he did this. And he did this on TV, on Minneapolis TV with Wally Carbo. So Wally then comes back, yes, you got the $20,000. However, this title defense will be inside a steel cage. And Mad Dog went ballistic, screaming, what do you think we are, animals?
Put him in a cage.
Yeah. And though that night the crowd was stunned as the Vachon brothers were victorious in a blood bath. And I did not go, but anyone that went was just stunned, because Bruiser beat them from pillar to post. But that's okay, But, Verne had high regards for Mad Dog.
Yeah.
He put a lot of fear into the hearts of fans.
He did. He was definitely a top attraction there for a very long time.
The other main event was AWA champion Verne Gagne, who emerged victorious. We just talked about the stellar record that Baron had for months at the amphitheater.
Right.
And during the Bruiser book interview, Baron tells me he didn't even know that he was going to be in the main event at White Sox Park. He was in Indianapolis in the fake TV locker room.
Right.
And Bruiser says, all right, you're next, Jim. And August 14th, you're facing Gagne at the ballpark. He said, what? What am I doing? It was one of those situations. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah. 2 minutes. Go. No, that's crazy. So we saw all summer long or leading into this big event. They've been building the Baron for something. We didn't know what it was. Baron didn't know what it was, apparently. And he finds out, no, you're working Verne at Comiskey Park, by the way, for the AWA World Heavyweight title. Now, Verne will retain, but that was a hell of a job building up. I mean, they had 4 shows in 5 weeks here at the amphitheater as they built towards August here in this big event, building the Baron up, and they did a tremendous job to make him look like a credible challenger.
And Bob Luce secured publicity, pre-match publicity in the Chicago Tribune with a columnist who was really big in Chicago named David Condon, who celebrated in the ring that night at White Sox Park. Bruiser, Gagne would sometimes bring him to the ringside for a title bout. And Condon, in his column the next day, wrote, Gagne humiliates Baron Chauncey von Raschke. But listen to the rest of the card here.
Okay.
We had Dr. X over Paul Diamond, Ernie Ladd no contest versus Lanza, Snyder over Mitsu, Pepper Gomez beat Double X, who was unmasked as Jim Osborne, Big Bill Miller drew Bobo Brazil, Larry Hennig beat Red Bastien, and for the girls, Jean Antone and Lucille Dupree beat Linda Klein and Betty Nicolai. The standard record book says it was 17,000 fans, so this worked pretty good. It didn't come, they didn't come close to that record, 207,000, but still everyone had a nice payoff, I'm sure.
I'd imagine so, yeah.
And they came back about 2.5 weeks later on a Tuesday night, September 1st, back at the Aragon Ballroom, where the main event was Blackjack Lanza defeating Dr. X, who was unmasked that night. And they gave out the phony name Bruce Marshall.
Okay.
Not Dick Beyer. And this was the end of Dr. X as a steady performer at the Chicago Wrestling Club, who had a distinguished and successful ring run here. And he was obviously, he was able to resume his destroyer identity.
Right. And
an 8mm film of this match is on YouTube, thanks to the courtesy of Rasslin Relics, who purchased the Bill Ondeco video and photo library.
Very cool.
Okay, also on the card, we had the Fabulous Kangaroos, El Costello and Don Kent, against beating Snyder and Louis Martinez. And this is the Chicago Wrestling debut for this version of the Kangaroos, managed by George Crybaby Cannon. Cannon blew this annoying whistle at ringside that annoyed the fans, sort of like Alfonso in ECW.
Oh, yeah, that was annoying.
It worked for him, too.
Yeah, I'd seen Cannon do this with Eric the Red at some point, so I've seen the shtick.
Other matches, we had Moose over Lars, Von Raschke over Bill Howard, Gomez over Christie, and Bad Boy Belinsky over a young Bob Windham. Belinsky was an imposter bruiser for Jack Pfeffer in Boston in 1962. Belinsky was also Bad Boy Shields in 1970 in Japan when he toured with Verne, and his gimmick was that of a wrestling truck driver, complete with an air horn.
This is really intriguing to me because I somehow skipped this little note that you had when I went over these notes and was preparing myself. And, many, many years later, they would use this truck driver with air horn gimmick in WCW 94-95 with Barry Darso when he would come in as the Blacktop Bully to feud with Dustin Rhodes.
Wow, yeah.
I kind of wonder, I'm doing some math, like who was watching this back then? Was it Bobby Heenan's idea? Did he pitch that to him? Somebody had to have pitched that idea because I just can't see them coming up with that idea all over again here with the air horn and everything attached. So that's very cool.
Yes. September 15th. Listen, they're going now every 2 weeks. They're back to the amphitheater. Only 5 bouts on this card. Lanza over Carpentier, the Kangaroos over Wilbur and Pepper, Von Raschke over Windham, Mitsu over Bill Howard, and Big K over Angelo Poffo. There was another AWA card that same night with the Vachons headlining against Hennig and Lars. It wasn't too big of a crowd, only $100 no-show payoff for Bruiser. And
that might be his lowest payoff that we've seen all year.
Yeah, that was, well, that's not really you heard the names. I don't know how anxious I'd pay money and take a bus.
Kind of interesting, though, that they went so light. And I'm not trying to rip on any of the talent because we do have some talent there, but in regards to main event, it's like, where's the main event when I'm looking at this particular card? Yeah.
They went back 2 weeks again. They had 3 cards in 1 month at the Chicago Wrestling Club. The main event were the Fabulous Kangaroos, El Costello and Don Kent against Bruiser and Bad Boy Belinsky. The Kangaroos won on disqualification. The crowd must have been way smaller. Bruiser's payout was only $600. When you consider anytime we mention a payout of him,
right,
we're talking about thousands. We had Carpentier, no contest against Lanza, Pepper over Mitsu, Moose beat Windham. Years later, in the 1980s, Moose was a guest on Bob Luce's talk show. And he says, and he was commenting about having experiences with Windham early in his career. He says, Windham said to me, Moose, I'm so nervous that night. And he says, listen, you've had good training. Just follow me and look where Windham ended up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also on that night, Paul Diamond over Ken Dillinger, who had been using the name Ken Russell up to that time.
Yeah.
So next 3 weeks later, Tuesday, October 20th, we are back at the International Amphitheater. Lanza and Heenan against Bruiser. Lanza and Heenan won because Bruiser failed to pin both wrestlers within 30 minutes. Bruiser vowed to give them both $2,000 if he failed. Bruiser's payoff was $1,100, and he flew back to Indianapolis on Delta because the next day was the weekly television tape. The monthly television tapings at the Armory. So they had a lot of work to do the next day with tapings and interviews. Okay, tonight also on that card, AWA champs Mad Dog and Butcher defeated Bastien and Gomez. That was a new team coming out of the AWA as Red Lions went back to Toronto. Carpentier beat Bill Miller, Hennig over Billy Red Cloud, Bobo beat Mitsu, and Paul Diamond beat Windham. So based on the Bruiser payoff, that was just a fair to good attendance. Okay, Monday, November 9th, 1970, Mad Dog Vachon challenges Verne 2 out of 3 falls for the AWA Championship. Verne wins. We have the Kangaroos beating Bastien and Gomez. Carpentier over Von Raschke. I'll take that back. It was a no contest. Carpentier versus Von Raschke. Snyder beat Windham. And now Windham is wrestling main event caliber stars,
Yeah.
Igor Vodic beat Hennig, and Bad Boy Belinsky over Ken Dillinger. Bruiser with a $325 payoff.
And very cool to see the mighty Igor there, Igor Vodic.
And the final card of the year was December 12th, 1970, at the International Amphitheater. Back to Saturday night. The Kangaroos, Costello, and Kent, it was a no contest against Bruiser and Bobo. Sometimes Bruiser would have Bobo or Sailor Art Thomas as the fall guy for a tag match.
Okay.
But this must have drawn pretty good with the Bruiser with a $1,900 payoff.
Early Christmas present for himself.
Sometimes I only know what Bruiser's payoff is, not the whole schmear.
But it's cool because we can kind of get an idea of what they might have drawn or how they might have done.
Hey, I work in finance. I should do a little chart showing Bruiser's payoff versus the box office. In fact, that table is in the book Bruiser, the World's Most Dangerous Wrestler from Crowbar Press, where I analyzed 12 payout sheets in the mid-1970s. And I came up with the formula. Of course, it's a little off because whenever there was a payoff, when they came up with their calculation, they rounded it up to the nearest $25 or a $50. They didn't have a payoff of $107.88. They made it $125.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. On this final card, we also had Barron over Gomez, Igor over Miller, counted out of the ring. Mil Mascaras makes a one shot.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't remember him back.
Okay.
But here is a big major debut. Strong Kobayashi, a Japanese wrestler managed by Big K and out of the AWA. He wrestled Ivan Kamelkopf, who also served as the manager to mighty Igor Vodek. And so the final match of the season was Lars Anderson over Paul Christie. So we had a big we had a big ballpark card this year.
Yes, absolutely.
And
20 cards too. That's a new level, right? 20 having 20 shows this year.
I think it hurt their overall box office having to go to that Aragon Ballroom.
Yeah, I can see that.
That is about 8 or 9 miles north of the amphitheater. So if you had South Side wrestling fans who are used to going on the South Side for the amphitheater, now you have to go all the way up on Broadway and Lawrence. Lawrence is at 4,800 north in the grid, where the amphitheater was at 4,300 south in the grid, in the street addresses. So you see that they will use Donovan Hall and other smaller venues when they can't get the amphitheater. And you don't want to just not have wrestling.
And we would see that in a lot of different territories, like Memphis, for instance, when they couldn't get the Mid-South Coliseum, they would have to move as well. So,
okay.
Because the show must go on, as they say. But my goodness, what another huge year, 20 cards. I mean, we got the big Comiskey Park show. Bobby Heenan dupes Dick the Bruiser yet again. First, he turns on him in that epic, what would have been a tag team match. Now he collects $2,000 thanks to Bruiser unable to get pins on both he and, Lanza. They're in the handicap match. Lots of great stories. We see the end of the chain gang. However, the Vachons continue to rise. They are at the top. They remain at the top. Baron von Raschke, what a push here in 1970.
Yes.
There's a lot of great moving parts to Chicago right now.
It is. And it was a great place to grow up watching wrestling. I didn't even fully realize the WWA and AWA. I knew about AWA from the magazines, but the magazines didn't per se cover the WWF, although there may have been some pictures with belts.
Right.
But I didn't. I later realized, hey, I had the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, guys coming through both sides, absolutely. Yeah, and you got to witness it all, and what a time in the world of wrestling to have such a successful, as you pointed out, with the 1969 paydays and things of that nature. I mean, basically on par with St. Louis, and rightfully so, given the talent that's here right now. It's a hotbed for professional wrestling.
Although I understand that Chicago Wrestling Club still had to pay for their TV time, unlike St. Louis getting paid. But that was just the local ratings were just phenomenal in St. Louis, whereby the station would pay them and still make money.
It's a little different, but yeah, it's good times here to be in the world of wrestling, especially if you're a promoter here in Chicago. And Richard, before we wrap up this edition of the show, I want you to, you touched on it a little bit ago, but I would love for you to promote your Bruiser book, your Wilbur Snyder book that you did. Please tell everybody a little bit about some of the things that you've put out there.
In 2016, Crowbar Press published Bruiser, the World's Most Dangerous Wrestler, written by myself. And then in 2025, Crowbar Press published Wilbur Snyder, the World's Most Scientific Wrestler, co-written by myself and Steve Verrier, who is probably most famous for the Gene Comiskey biography.
Right.
Those are the two claim the fame. Those are the two most famous projects.
Well, rightfully so. I encourage everybody to head on over to Crowbar Press, pick that up wherever it's available out there, because Richard did a lot of work, hard work. It's been a while since I went through the Bruiser book, but when it first came out, I grabbed that one, and it's phenomenal. And I was able to get a hold of, the Wilbur Snyder book. We talked about it. We had Steve on the show with you when we talked about Wilbur a little bit there. And I'm looking forward, to going back and diving back into those things to help me with some of my research for other projects I have going on. But for this week, guys, we're going to wrap things up. Richard, I want to thank you so much for coming back on Regional Rasslin. We look forward to seeing what happens in Chicago in the 1970s ahead, man.
Yes, because I'm ready to send you revised outlines from 1970 to 78. Oh, they're in the can.
Oh, I love it. I like it when it's in the can, man.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, guys. It's been another blast here with Richard Vicek. Always a good time when he's on the show. Everybody, great feedback every time you're on, Richard. And they love learning about a territory that's not taught. And it's so weird because Chicago's a big city, but it's not talked about like some of the other territories. So it's so great to have you on here and discuss Chicago Wrestling Club history, man.
Very good. Thanks again. We'll see you guys again.
Absolutely, guys. More Regional Rasslin on the way.